All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us. My name is Heidi Eager. I work for the Winneshiek Energy District. And today we are having a conversation about community foundations and energy districts and how they work together and how they fit together. And we've got MJ Smith from the Greater Dubuque Community Foundation. And I'll turn it over to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Heidi. It's really nice for me to see so many familiar names and join all of you by Zoom for this luncheon. My role at the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque is one called Senior Affiliate Advisor, and I live in Guttenberg, Iowa. I've been in this work for about 15 years. Our mission at the Community Foundation is really something that was visualized and formed by leaders in Dubuque who saw that our region was strong and that we could empower and equip high-performing communities. For a little background on who we serve, it's interesting that our for a national overview, 20% of all people live in a rural community. But of course, for us, we all feel rural. We always point out that 7% of all U.S. foundation funding is directed to rural communities, and that includes regions, institutions, and healthcare. And so we share our message about our impact with many partners across the state, the region, the nation, and our message around energy districts is often interwoven into this closing the gap statistic. How we work includes intense cultivation of leaders and partners. And so we're really always focused on social capital, the tools that can allow individuals, families, businesses, and communities forge their own future. Within our rural portfolio, which includes about a third of our endowed assets, we're always looking at capacity building, developing philanthropic leaders, providing infrastructure or operating funds for community organizing and bringing all voices to the table, building the capacity for communities to be welcoming, especially of new Americans. We do work hard at tracking our progress and our data, and we work hard at communicating. Our time to rethink rural in terms of building high-performing communities really started about 2004 when we welcomed the first affiliate foundation. And for those of you who are in Winneshiek County, Winneshiek is also an affiliate foundation of the Community Foundation of Northeast Iowa. And we respect their leadership, their work, and we work with them when we can. But you're a neighbor to Allamakee County, which was one of the first affiliate foundations that we began to guide. We now serve a 7-county region of about 250,000 individuals. And that would include beyond Allamakee, which is neighbor to you, Clayton, Delaware, Dubuque, Jones, Jackson, and Clinton. And so within that geography of 7 counties, there are 8 affiliate foundations. There are 2 in Clinton. One is the community of DeWitt and its rural neighbors. And then the city of Clinton has their own affiliate foundation. We also have an affiliate serving the Dyersville area and their neighboring communities. The work of community foundations in Iowa was accelerated about the year 2002 when Endow Iowa legislation was passed by the Iowa legislature in response to an Iowa State University study called the Transfer of Wealth Study. It was a landmark piece of research in that it actually measured the dollars that flowed out of places like Calmer or Volga or Preston to larger communities, whether they be Des Moines or Chicago or Denver or even across the globe. And it was this message about the loss of financial capital for rural communities that led to a very attractive state tax credit known as Endow Iowa. So for people that loved their rural place, they could leave dollars, they could make gifts now or leave dollars through their estate for their community, and in return receive a 25% state tax credit. So the numbers that I share as an example here on the right would be for Clayton County. From the 50-year period beginning in 2000 to 2049, there's an expected transfer of $2.5 billion from one generation to the next. For a family or a business that might be thinking of giving back through an endowment, we often suggest that the community is just another child in the family. So like, for instance, my own family, I grew up in Bremer County. My parents had 2 children, and neither my brother or I live in Bremer County, but we could think of our hometown and our county as a third member of the family. And we suggest a gift of 5% from a family, no matter how many children there are, to be considered a benchmark for thoughtful Iowans who want to give back forever. If that happened in Clayton County, we would secure $5.3 million of unrestricted dollars for community work. And I'm actually really proud to say that in Clayton right now, we have over $8 million in endowed assets. So it's fair to say that individuals in Clayton County have heard the message about Endow Iowa, and they've exceeded the benchmark that we suggest. Of our affiliate funds, you can see the total assets. Certainly Jackson is our largest affiliate, and then it goes down from there. But our 124 million, and actually the slide is a little older, and you're probably all aware that the market has been doing well. So it's actually right now closer to 135 million that we hold, and roughly about a third is for rural places. So these endowed funds then are invested to pay out 5% annually for causes that donors declare. The endowment building function that we focused on at the beginning of community foundation evolution here in Iowa was never going to be the end-all be-all of community foundation impact. There was nobody who wanted a foundation just to be a big sleepy bank with, you know, millions of dollars of endowed funds. So what we work hard at is directing those endowment dollars every year toward regional solutions. Part of the solution that we're looking at for communities today would simply be ideas for enhancing quality childcare, because that impacts almost every community that we serve. So how would we do that? First of all, we might convene an interest group of community leaders around childcare. For instance, in Andrew, Iowa, there is a model where the community school district provides childcare. Is that something that could work, for instance, in Elkader, or could it work in Manchester? So we have a network of leaders that might convene around that issue. We would also be lifting up childcare needs to our state government. And we're happy that there are funds designated now, not only for childcare planning, but for childcare facilities. It would also be something that we lift up to funders outside of Iowa. And we have successfully received 3 grants for childcare from national funders. And interestingly, this particular funder was very keen on just providing dollars for hiring and retention bonuses. When we interviewed about 16 childcare leaders in our region, they named that about 18 months ago as what they needed most. They simply needed cash to hire workers and award bonuses, and then retain workers with annual bonuses. So that would be an example of looking at an issue that's current and emerging and fostering, maybe several different solutions. I would also say that many endowment payouts were directed at childcare needs in the last 2 years. We are also happy to pilot good ideas, and Vision to Learn is an example of a program that we piloted probably about 10 years ago. What we heard from school leaders was that there were a growing number of students who simply didn't have the right eyeglasses to see. And of course, we know that a child must learn to read by the time they're in 3rd grade in order for them to read to learn after that. And so we partnered with a national funder and also the Tyson's family, which has a base in Dubuque, but 24 retail locations across our region and also into Wisconsin, for Vision to Learn to come to our neediest counties. And Alameda was one of the first counties that we worked in, and provided eyeglasses for 400 kids in Alameda County. The mobile van goes to the school in Postville or in Waukon. An optometrist examines the child in the van, and then they are fitted with 2 pairs of glasses, one to take home and one to leave at school. So again, this particular issue was brought to our attention by school leaders, and then we adopted it as an issue, and we worked with both this national Vision to Learn model and with a local funder to make it happen in our region. And it's ongoing today. Together with Vision to Learn and what we call Every Child Reads, which is a community initiative whereby we really focus on those 3rd grade reading benchmarks. We also are piloting something called the Rural Schools Collaborative. One of the issues that we've heard about is the difficulty in attracting and retaining school teachers, especially in certain subject areas. And so the Rural Schools Collaborative and reverse scholarships is a model whereby education majors, for instance, at Luther or Loras or the University of Northern Iowa, are awarded generous reverse scholarships in their junior and senior year of college, for in turn coming back and serving a rural area. When foundation donors come to us, often they have scholarships on their mind because it's such a common form of philanthropy. But this particular scholarship is not given to a high school senior who might think they want to be a teacher, but get to Luther and decide that instead they're going to major in political science. This is for the junior or senior in college who's committed to teaching and really entertaining, the last steps of their career, including student teaching. So that's another example of how we support rural education. Vision to Learn statistic here, about 8,000 students have been examined in our region. And then we come to your favorite subject, which is energy districts. When we began to think of our leverage as a region, we formed what's called the Northeast Iowa Funders Network. And that is one area where we partner with the Community Foundation of Northeast Iowa, as Chickasaw, Howard, and Winneshiek are part of this funders network. And the network members pay very, very modest dues annually. And those dues normally come from what we call County Endowment Program dollars, which is a distribution from the state of Iowa that is a percent of gaming revenue for non-gaming counties like Winneshiek, Chickasaw, and Howard. Clayton and Dubuque do not get the county endowment distribution because they are gaming counties. But in return for the membership dues, then we entertain ideas or proposals from that region, which might represent innovative approaches to problem solving that national funders or state partners might be interested in working on together, where there's a region involved. And so Andy brought the energy district needs to our attention and has received several grants. And that is really where I grew to appreciate the work of the energy district related to local wealth retention. So again, if we think back to the beginning of community foundations in Iowa, which is about 20 years ago, it was with this primary purpose of retaining wealth. And at the time, it was thought of as financial wealth. The transfer of wealth, the retaining of dollars through permanent endowments was our first focus. But I could see that this was such a strong companion strategy to endowment building, because whatever we want to say about climate, which is so very important, especially in the week following last, what we talk about with community leaders and families and businesses is saving money and being good stewards. And so as the energy district model has been built and evolved, it was easy to see that there was money to be saved with so many of the strategies that came out of the energy district movement. And that for every dollar that was saved, it would be another dollar for charity in Decorah or for a local business in Elkader. So we then adopted energy districts as an area of focus, and we were successful in obtaining one national grant that provided coaching for leaders in our region. And thanks to Jolene Jansen, who was the coach that was contracted to do that work, we were able to plant that seed of energy districts in our region. And we have applied for other national grants on behalf of energy districts. We've applied for one state grant on behalf of the model, and we have not been successful. So we do not have a record that I'm doing cartwheels over. We have way more work to do, but you can see that energy districts have many siblings in the Community Foundation family, that we work on a lot of important issues. So it's got a special place in our hearts, and will continue to have. This last summer, we were pleased to work on a pitch around energy districts that givingcompass.org shared on their platform. And Andy wrote a very compelling introduction to what he called Mission Possible, a locally owned and led energy transition in all 3,000 US counties. And then some friends that you know, including Craig Mosier, Harry Blowbaum, Jim Osterhaus, Jolene Jansen. They all worked to write the story of the energy district. And we ended up with 6 pieces that are now part of one story. We also convene leaders twice a year from across our region, and we featured energy districts as the very first topic for this regional roundtable, so that beyond the energy district leaders, we would have foundation leaders know about energy districts and economic developers know about energy districts. Those are the groups that make up what we call our regional roundtable. We do still convene this group twice a year. Of course, we had to move to a virtual format during the very height of COVID-19, but we did meet for the first time again in person in Bellevue about a month ago. And at that roundtable, we shared a model for community building called the idea-friendly method. And this was a facilitator who came to us with just a very specific approach to encouraging ideas and encouraging good ideas. So that's an example of how we bring together leaders. Following the George Floyd murder, when so many of us felt such anguish in terms of our response here in Iowa, many of our community foundation leaders across our 7 counties and 8 affiliates just spoke out loud about what can we do. And so it was at that time that we offered a 4-part series called Racial Healing for all of our affiliate foundation board members. And this was simply an introduction to some of the language that is both confusing and uniting around how we talk about race. And so, for instance, if there was a banker in Dyersville who went through this 4-part series with us that I'm thinking of, she's a very good example. She had heard of systemic racism, but she never really had examples of what it meant, and especially what it might mean today in rural Dubuque County. And so following that 4-part series, which we launched right away after just the tremendous outpouring of anguish across rural Iowa and certainly in the Twin Cities, we then moved to what was called the Rural Equity Network. So now we have a full-time staff person that just simply convenes people around rural equity. And so as an example, the first rural equity convening was just simply meeting people that are different than us. So we had a woman who grew up in Bombay that has a new baby and lives in Elkader. We met a rabbi from Postville. We also met someone who moved to Cascade, Iowa from Panama. And that was simply a way for leaders in our region who were committed to equity and inclusion to meet people that are different from them and start to get to know them as friends. The network is driven by its membership. And so we are always listening for ways that we can meet the learning needs of leaders. Certainly, we do envision an area connected, ideal logical ideologies, and that we do initiatives. The very newest one that we launched in 21 was called Small Town Dreams. Small Town Dreams are community challenge grants for high performing communities. We had the opportunity to engage with a donor who grew up in our region, became the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and was really just looking to give back to rural places. And we shared with him the success of a Nebraska model, whereby 42 towns in Nebraska have built their own unrestricted endowments, thanks to challenge grants from the Buffett family. Well, our anonymous donor, who grew up in our region, happened to be friends with Warren Buffett. And so we were lucky that thanks to Warren's example in Nebraska, this donor said, yeah, let's try it in Iowa. So we received a $1.5 million gift to engage with those communities who are ready to build their own unrestricted endowment. And the Alameda Forever Fund, which is based in will cover the whole county, is one of the 6 that we have started, and we have funding to do 10 in all. So Small Town Dreams is like any endowment challenge program that you might have heard about. First, we engage with a small group of leaders who in a quiet phase raise a 2-to-1 match for the donor's gift. And then we take that, which is the donor's gift and the leader's gift, and go out to the community at large. And so an important companion piece to the endowment building and fundraising that we do in Small Town Dreams is community visioning, because certainly if a community is going to have an endowment that pays out every year, they have to have good ideas for how they're going to use that money, how it's going to spark the best ideas and leverage investment from other places. So that's a part of what Small Town Dreams accomplishes. The other towns that are involved in Small Town Dreams initiative include the Foundation of Cornerstone Communities, which serves Guttenberg, Edgewood, and Garnavillo; Lincoln Way, which is DeWitt; Ryan, Iowa, which is a town of 400 people, and then the community of Bellevue. And as I said, we have a couple of grants left for other communities that are ready. We are focused on building self-determined, high-performing communities and ultimately a more vibrant and prosperous region. These are just some of our donors and leaders that are engaged with us, and you might recognize some of those individuals. And we certainly appreciate the partnership of Andy and so many people that are on this call, who've been supportive of community foundations, engaged as board members, engaged as grantees, and we just appreciate being able to work together from here. So with that, I will stop, Heidi, and you can maybe direct me to what I forgot or any questions.
Thank you so much. I have my video off because my internet is unstable, but I am still here.
Okay.
So if anyone has any questions, we are not a huge group. Feel free to just unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, you can type things into the chat. I had a big picture question. At the very beginning, you were talking about US Foundation money distributed nationally. Where, like, how is the whole US Foundation organization? Like, how is the funding? Where's the major source of the funding coming from?
You know, Heidi, the National Council of Foundations assimilates data from major foundations and then tracks, you know, let's just say Ford and Robert Wood Johnson and the very big players, the Gates Foundation, and then tracks where those dollars go. So,
okay,
you know, some of the dollars go out of the US, but of the dollars that stay in the US directed toward, you know, meeting needs of communities, there's just, you know, comparably a low percentage that touches rural places. And so that's part of our message when we talk to a funder, for instance, about energy districts, is to say that these rural places with these great ideas, they are underfunded.
Mhm.
And let's give them a chance. So we share this same, kind of Community Foundations 101 presentation with a lot of different audiences. And with every audience, we point this out.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick comment and a question. And thanks, MJ, for coming on. And I want to comment that you mentioned when we came to you about energy districts a few years back, it was actually Craig, who is here on the call, who linked us all together. Craig had been serving on the Funders Network board. So so many of the people involved in energy districts, just as an example, are involved in so many other community building exercises like community foundations. So that's great cross-fertilization. The question I had, one of them is around, I mean, I guess it's a comment and a question, an appreciation really for the work you do. The partnerships are so mutually reinforcing with community foundations, with your work. Whereas oftentimes I think when organizations like ours and others look outwards at some of the other foundations, the biggest ones or the next levels down, so many times private foundations that are not rurally based have a very paternalistic attitude towards rural areas, right?
Mhm.
As if they know what's best.
Right.
How do we deal with that? You have to deal with it too, because you all try and pursue some of those funds. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I know, Andy, that you and I have kind of observed and shared some of the history around the funding experiences that both of us have. And I do think that so much of it comes down to the personal relationship between, for instance, a program officer and us, or
Right.
a convening where you are shoulder to shoulder with funders. And our CEO, Nancy Van Milligan, she has honestly just relished traveling all over to tell our story. And not every CEO wants to be, first in Boston and then LA and then Atlanta and then Miami and, telling our story like this, just giving this presentation over and over and over so that people finally start seeing, and I don't mean to say they don't see it at all, but so
Yeah.
they remember what they heard, they remember what they saw. We were noticed by Robert Wood Johnson about 5 years ago, and they sent a team to really look at our model and meet us and expose our work to others and to funders. And that has been helpful. Certainly we've made inroads, for instance, with Walmart, and are funded by them over and over again at a national level. The Nathan Cummings Award came from that same type of, one-on-one, get to know the people. We did have a small award from Solutions Project, and I know you did too. And of course, we had Rudy here in Decorah to meet all of us. But funders are serious about stewardship and return on investment. And so that's always our first story, is just how hard we work and our impact. And you have such a tremendous impact. So I don't know how you break through, as you said, through some of the paternalistic force field.
Well, what you mentioned about the convening is super important, to others on the call. I mean, MJ's work and that of other community foundation leaders, they're often the connectors. So, I mean, that's been really helpful. And you mentioned Solutions. That's a great example too of foundations that are not the biggest ones, that are also willing to trust
Right.
the rest of us.
Mhm.
And so they bring it with all kinds of strings attached, and you have to report to them every month. You know, they look at
Right.
who you are and they decide they like what you do and they give you some funds. So yeah, anyway,
Right.
others want to jump in.
We have a
Hi,
question-
Craig. I think you might be on mute.
Yep.
I always forget. So yeah, it's great to see all of you folks. MJ, you've done an enormous amount to help this region. The Funders Network was just a remarkable idea that I think worked really well. But I think this whole conversation is really interesting about how do we reach out to people who would be delighted to fund us if they knew the story. And I think the relationship building is a key part of it that you talk about. And that's part of what you're so good at. And you build these relationships with these other foundations, and then they get to see the opportunities that they have here to invest. And I just wonder how do we reach more foundations in that way? I mean, I don't know what the foundation network, how that all works. Are there regional meetings of private foundations? Are there, I'm sure there's a national association that has conferences. Are there things that we could be trying to do to reach out more? I mean, you've done so much in this way already to try to connect to
Mhm.
some of those groups. Is there a way we can help with that in any way?
Well, it's really a good question. You know, I have to be honest that with the onset of the pandemic in March of 20, we really had to pivot to immediate needs that stemmed from that experience. And for instance, in all 8 of our affiliates, we had to launch COVID relief funds and just invite local leaders to trust our grant makers that they could give money to those affiliate funds. And then we would supplement the food banks. We would send grants to the daycare centers, to schools. And that has been just a huge area of focus. I don't want to say it's a distraction because it's not a fair descriptor. It was just real.
Mhm.
And also the shift in how people work. We have an office of 27 people, and now most of the people only come in 1 or 2 days a week. And so and it's necessary. I mean, we have young staff with families, and if that's just their model now, that's how they want to work.
Mhm.
So that's been a shift again, where we have to kind of work differently. And I think your question is a very good question. I think it deserves attention. I think, we are coming to a little more of an open road in terms of what's next. So, I mean, I think what I would pledge to do, Craig, is now we've got the articles done, they're up and they're in a good form. To go back to some of the people that participated in our front porch visit, which was again, an opportunity that we put to the energy districts to tell the story. And Harry and Andy and Jim, they were part of that discussion with a couple of funders. I think it's probably time to go back and say, what do you remember? Who could you direct us to? And I don't know, in the infrastructure bill part 1 that was passed by the president, I don't know if there's anything in there that we can see light of day, that there might be, federal support, if we could provide local support. I think that's another unanswered question in my mind. And then I don't know in part 2, if it gets passed, the Build Back Better program, I don't know if there would be anything there.
Much more in part 2, potentially, I think. There may be some
Okay.
opportunities in part 1. Part 1 is energy-wise, it's much more the tax incentives, tax
Okay.
credits, big time tax credits. Actually, sorry, the tax credits are in part 2 as well. Part 1 is a lot of EV infrastructure. So
Okay.
those funds will get distributed through state energy offices mostly.
Mhm.
And there may be some grant programs then we can tie into, just like the VWs, but the next round hopefully will be both the tax incentives, which will have a big role in educating around, but they won't
Right.
necessarily bring dollars to energy districts. But then there are theoretically very large dollars for energy efficiency. And that's where we can also put boots on the ground and do the technical work. So
Right.
if we can actually make those connections and bring that to fruition, there's possibility there. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, that's encouraging. Yeah. And Craig, it's a very good question. You know, that, like I said, as a follow-up to our time together here, I will put some time into it.
Okay. Well, it's a challenge, and, you know, all of us would more than ready to pitch in, but we're not quite sure what,
Right.
exactly what to do, you know, so, you know, whatever
Right.
guidance you come up with will be really
Well,
helpful. So,
I mean, I think I'll probably ask our anonymous donor who gave us 1.5 million for the challenge grants. I mean, he might have some ideas.
Well, so if he's a friend of Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett is one of the largest wealth extractors from rural America, let's ask Warren to reinvest a little bit. Just connections here. You know, Craig, you have a different regional community foundation, right?
We do.
MJ, are there people that they should be talking to? Or Craig, maybe you already have been, but.
Have you met Ellie Moore, Craig?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
'cause
in fact, we received a $10,000 grant through the
Good.
5224 Good branch of the Community Foundation of Johnson County. And Ellie worked with Ellie on that.
Good.
So that was a nice foot in the door. That was a capacity building grant, which was not tied to specific programs and stuff, which is really helpful for a new organization like ours that needs that kind of money to get started. We're only 3 years old, so we're just kind of getting going. And so yes, that's a terrific resource. I don't know of a lot of private. I mean, Stanley is in Iowa, Hall Perrine is in Iowa, but I don't know of a lot of other privates, and I don't know that any of them are particularly interested in energy. So
That's a tough one.
yeah.
But the regional community foundations, you have state associations, but there's not really a state community foundation, right? It's basically the major regional community foundations and then the affiliates. Is that right, MJ? The actual
Right.
structure.
The Iowa Council, a foundation, does convene us for continuing education.
Okay,
They have no other grant program though.
right. And so in terms of these building connections with some larger private foundations, potentially, could there be value, or would it be possible for multiple regional foundations, yours, Johnson County, maybe someone in Illinois, maybe someone in Wisconsin, right, to together approach and say, look, we're multi-state here. We
Right.
need to pay attention. I don't know. I'm just popping
Yeah.
ideas off here, but yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think that there's always strength in that. And especially, you know, some of the partners that we work with, they want it to be a region. They don't want one community or one county, you know,
Right,
so
right, right.
instead of just, you know, our region, which is 8 counties now, it's the Iowa City region, or it's the Northeast Iowa region, or it's across the river. Mhm.
Well, I think a key piece of this is the whole idea of partnership. You know, because we're a small organization, we have very little staff time, really. We have a part-time staff person. We have to partner. We don't have a Green Hour AmeriCorps team here that can do this work. The one in Iowa City is focused in Iowa City and can't help. So we're partnering with HACAP and with churches to distribute light bulbs and to do shower heads and some of that stuff that GIA is doing in some of the other counties. And if we can get some funding to build that out into the rural area, the money we have now from Iowa City is got to be spent in Iowa City. But we're really trying to reach the rural area around Iowa City, and hope it would be nice to get a GIA team going in the county outside of town. So we'll talk to IEEE about that. But if we could find funding to do that kind of work in the county, that would be really welcome. And the community foundation money will help to do that. So.
Mhm.
So we've got a question here from Terrence asking, is there a list of projects that have been proposed for funding? I feel like that ties into Craig's idea there for a project.
Mhm. The pitch has normally been for this continued coaching, and dollars too for supplies, for the energy assessments and the activities that follow the assessments that Craig was detailing. But for the community foundation to approach funders on behalf of the energy district, it's around these basic, get the energy district in Jackson County up and get these volunteers going and get a part-time staffer and get a fundraising model going. Same with Alameda, Delaware. Clayton is really already a very strong model. If we could get all 7 of ours to that point, we would be very happy. And I know Michaela is on this call. And of course, she's leading the work so effectively in Dubuque. They have their own mojo going. But that's the metro. That's not, across the county line in Delaware. So for Terrence's answer, it's in our mind, it is this grassroots, identifying the champions and then equipping them.
And that's kind of network building. And then I should add, energy districts, individual energy districts are also, of course, doing, grant writing proposals for specific projects. Right. So if part of the question was about, well, what specific projects do you do on the ground? That's not so much something that Community Foundation is going to write grants for individual sort of hometown projects. It's more of a network building deal. So.
Well, thank you all for being good listeners and for these good questions. Heidi, I appreciated the invitation, and hi to Harry and Lyle, if they're still there. We didn't hear much from them.
There's Harry.
Thank you, MJ. It was amazing. Thank you for what you've done and to help me personally wade through the Community Foundation and Northeast Iowa Funders Network and hooking me up with Andy and getting things rolling in Clayton County. It was amazing having your support. And I might say too that we were talking about a champion to help us get started, and MJ in the early months of our organization in Clayton County found a funder that literally pulled us up by our bootstraps and just really gave us encouragement. It wasn't a large grant, but it was enough so that we could start paying a manager and really got us going. So she continues to keep her feet to the ground here in this movement. Thank you.
Yep, and thanks, MJ. It's great to see you again. Good, and a good explanation. I've been on the periphery of explanations of this whole thing for a number of years, and this helped put many of those uncompleted thoughts together to better understand how you fit into the picture, and how it's interesting that Winneshiek sits in this odd little spot, actually in a different region, but affiliated with you, and so that's never occurred to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it still is a little fuzzy as to how this all works, but
Mm-hmm.
this helps.
Yeah, when the county endowment program was introduced, there was kind of a land grab, to be honest, about, this office will take this county and this office will take this county. And so we ended up with at least a contiguous region, and they're pretty well set now. So we just try to work very closely with the Community Foundation Northeast Iowa. It's certainly fair to say each region is different, though. Everybody has their own model.
Yeah, before I got on the Energy District Board, I was at NICC, and the chair of the Winneshiek Foundation was Tom Ridout. He first introduced me to the whole idea of the foundations and how they fit into some piece of this puzzle. And then when I got into the energy district and then starting to talk about building out a movement, we kind of switched from, my mental model switched toward you as the picture of energy, of foundations, you know, so
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
part of my confusion is that
Yeah,
Well, but the Northeast Iowa Funders Network was a good example of interregional collaboration. So.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Mhm. And I would say that the last grant that the Funders Network made, Harry, you would have just loved this. There was a proposal from the Northeast Iowa RC&D for what was called a multi-cropping pilot project. And so I think there were 19 farmers in Fayette County and beyond. We did a site visit in Fayette County that grew cereal grains after soybeans. And then the cereal grain was used by distillers and breweries. And so the grant was really to test water quality, with this multi-cropping approach, and measure that compared to the normal model. And then build out a business plan for what these farmers were going to do with all this rye. So some of it, of course, goes to rye flour and some of it went to the brewers and distillers. But it was such an exciting project because the water quality results were so amazing. And we were out in the field, we saw the water, we looked at the soil, we looked at the stubble of the rye, we looked at the emerging soybeans, we compared the yield on the beans, and just feel like it was a tremendous investment for the network to move that work ahead. The other grant that we made in the last year was to Upper Explore Land for their EV work, you know, planning for EV infrastructure. So that's somewhat related. But anyway, Harry, you would have loved that site visit out at
Yes,
that.
I would have. You know, farmers love to be involved. There's another project
Oh,
that
yeah.
we were involved with when I was in Strawberry Point, and they want to do something besides plant and harvest beans and corn, and to have something new for them where they can see results right away is really important.
And Lyle, I know about your amazing work with SILT, and we actually try to lift that model up when we're working with donors who need different ideas on farm legacy. So, you know, you're famous in a couple of ways.
well, you know, yeah, kind of at the intersection of a couple of strange things here.
No, they're all related.
With Webb and Silton, it's occurred to me over and over that there is a relationship. So if you have any thoughts about more of that relationship and how that could fit into anything that foundations do, you know, I'm on the board of SILT
Mhm.
as well as being involved in the other ways. So you know, interesting to pass along ways that these things can fit together. A
Mhm.
particular one that strikes me right at the moment, and I plan to put out to a number of people who are involved in the energy thing here. You know, the articles that most recently came out is this solar farm in Colorado that's gotten a lot of press now for being also a vegetable farm under the solar panels. So
Mhm.
with, you know, I'm thinking, all right, so SILT has this ability to protect land for food production through easements or through donated. How can this whole combination of a solar farm and a protected food farm fit together, and what are the obstacles in doing so? So there's interesting potential and interesting obstacles. I need to get feedback from people about both.
Mhm.
So,
Well, Susan was on a staff call in September.
okay.
And
Good.
so our regional leaders, the staffers for the region heard about the model, and where there's a little bit of tension is that when we work with landowners who are charitable, oftentimes our model is that, the farm will be gifted, and then depending on the landowner, we agree to hold it for 50 years, or we don't have to hold it, just depending on their wishes. But then the funds are endowed for a nonprofit cause. So what we talked about with her was simply that really we could be companions in introducing these charitable farmers to the SILT model, because it's not the whole farm.
Mhm.
It's a section of the farm that you're interested in for local food production. So it was a very good conversation. And I'm not sure where the solar vegetable part of it comes in. But it sounds like a great winter project for you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I need something to do, so, right. Good to see you, Harry.
Thank you.
Well, the solar vegetable thing is a wonderful idea, because think about how startup small vegetable farmers struggle
Yep.
to generate enough income.
Yep.
Here's an income source that
Right,
could subsidize the vegetable farm, right?
And it's also good for small livestock like sheep and chickens. There's potential for all of those embedded into this whole model
mhm,
of how to do that.
In Germany, we saw large solar fields with sheep grazing the grass underneath them.
Yeah.
Not goats, because they like wiring, but
Right.
sheep.
Right.
Yeah, there are agrivoltaics around the world increasingly, but our challenge here really is the financial incentive and policy side as much as anything, because we don't really have a situation where farmers can band together like in Europe and invest themselves and own a whole bunch of big utility scale. I mean, it's basically in our system, it needs to be utilities, or they're utility developers that do this. So
Right.
we need to get those folks interested in this model and willing to adapt their
Right.
their
Right.
developments to something like this, because we could find the farmers interested in doing it
Yeah.
with land, but if the next era developers don't have a whit of interest, then yeah, those are
Right. So that's kind of the questions I want to put out to people to respond to. How, the limitations that we're operating under need to be understood by people who would like to do this.
right,
And that might be investors who would like to create projects and do a PPA, or it might be somebody who happens to have land which is in the right spot in order to do this.
mhm,
But there might be farmers who have land they'd like to do this and not be in the right spot. So what are those right spots? Where's the convergence of the things that function? And how does it relate to the organizations that can help enable
mhm.
this? So for me, it's how does SILT intersect with energy districts to find the answers to that combination of right spots. So that's the end of my time.
Well, some large solar developers, like one just south of Iowa City, are talking about pollinators under the panel.
Sure.
So it's not much of a step from there.
No.
No,
No,
it's
not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you, MJ.
the big developers though.
Thank you
Yeah,
all.
sure.
I'm gonna have to jump off the call here, but thank you, Heidi, for all the good instructions on getting here today, and for everything that you guys are doing. Great to see you again.
Thank you, MJ.
Thank you,
Okay,
and thanks all for
Thanks so
coming.
much, MJ.
yep,
Bye.
bye.
Good to see you all.
Take care.